Hello, and welcome to episode 29 of Calder's Calling, the Calder Times flagship podcast and your premier podcast destination for everything surrounding the American Hockey League. My name is Jay Foster. I'm joined today by Deana Weinheimer and Corey Swart. We've got the whole gang here. And on today's show, I think we're going to get a little bit unhinged. We're going to be previewing the Hershey Bears Cleveland Monsters series because I think Deana and I are now in a fight with Corey for the next week and a half to 2 weeks. Before we kick that off, though, if you're not already subscribed to us on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube, make sure you do that now. If you're currently watching us on YouTube, you can like, you can share, leave a comment. If you hit the little bell button below the screen, you can get every episode straight into your feed. You'll get a little notification that pops up. It really cuts out the middleman, and it helps us out as well. I'd also like to thank our show sponsor, Document Doctors. While not on the ice, they can help you and your business optimize and increase your revenue and profits to a bigger slice. Check out DocumentDoctorsLLC.com and don't forget to mention that the Calder Times sent you to them. Time to do our 3 stars. We'll start off with our 3 stars as we always do, and I'm sure it will shock no one to find out who Corey's Corey's star of the week is. So why don't you take us away, Corey? Which Hershey Bear have you chosen this week?
Well, I was supposed to say you have chosen correctly. I am going with Garrett Rowe from the Bears. This is a guy that, it's probably overdue for me to pick him as one of my 3 stars here. This is a guy that, came into the lineup. He was a healthy scratch for the first few games of Hershey's playoff season here. As you'll see on the screen, this is his first goal from Hershey's last game on Wednesday. A sweet little deflection goal, perfect spot by Hardy Haman Octel there, who, is a solid head taller than everybody else on the ice in that shot there. But Garrett Rowe's kind of an X factor kind of player. It's hard to believe, guys. He's 36 years old, I believe, and this season is his first bit of Calder Cup playoff action since he departed overseas to play most of his career over there. He's coming back towards Hershey to be closer to his family in Virginia, one of the 3 Virginia players the Bears have. And he's just been electric in these playoffs. He had immediate impact. We've talked like the last couple of weeks about Ivan Miroshnichenko and his great performance. And a lot of that's due to him being on a line with Garrett Rowe as well as Mike Vecchione, 2 guys that are just great to be on a line with in terms of, they've really turned that whole line into a dominant scoring threat for the Bears. And Rowe, just continues to impress. He's kind of, I think if I remember prior to last round, I said that he was going to be the Henrik Borgstrom of sorts of this Bears team. And a couple of big goals against the Wolfpack is just what Henrik Borgstrom did last year. So right on the money with that prediction, I feel like so far. He's been fantastic. Just totally an edge player that, he's not afraid to stir the pot. He's not afraid to, get in someone's face, even though he's a bit of a smaller guy. I know you guys appreciate that type of player. I appreciate that type of player. And, Garrett Rowe has just been fantastic. And I have to give it to him. It's one of those things where you think anytime you take out a guy like Matthew Phillips out of the lineup, healthy, mind you, in favor of Garrett Rowe, on paper, that sounds like a what are you doing kind of thing. But, Garrett Rowe has proven that, his contributions have been all over the ice. Obviously, Matthew Phillips, no disrespect to him, he was, dealing with a lower body injury from the regular season. So, there's a little bit of a factor in there as well. But Garrett Rowe's been fantastic, and he's a guy that's impossible to take out of the lineup now.
Playoffs is like that. Sometimes you have to take a guy out for a guy that you wouldn't normally in the regular season, and it all works out. I don't know if my star of the week technically counts as a homer pick, because I guess Milwaukee is the series that I am I am covering temporarily because the Barracuda did not make the playoffs. I don't know if you heard, but Milwaukee's still alive. So I'm going for a Milwaukee Admiral this week, and I'm going for Igor Afanasyev, who is just killing the game this series. He had kind of a slow start, but in his last 3 games for the Milwaukee Admirals, he has 4 goals and 6 points. And he's been part of the there was a real youth movement in Milwaukee. He's their second highest scorer. He got 9 points in 10 games. The only guy ahead of him is Zach Lheureux, who, by the way, is still shooting a stupid amount. He's got 8 goals on 18 shots, which is so funny. But Afanasyev, 5th in scoring, 2nd among teams that are still active. And I think he's the oldest of the Admiral's kids, and he was born in 2001. So that tells you what you need to know about the youth movement in Milwaukee. It's really been working out for them everywhere except the goal. They've obviously had to go with the veteran in Troy Grosnick, but this kid's he's just a ton of fun. Like that goal that we're showing you now, this clip, like just what a great goal. He is definitely going to be a guy, I think, that is going to make a real case for being on Nashville next season, up with the big team.
Can I give, and the only reason why I'm keeping this clip up is because I wanted to bring up, okay, watch who has the puck now, number 25. He kicks that over to set up that play. If he didn't have the foresight to kick that over, that goal does not happen.
Nope.
That was just so sneaky. He got that over to O'Reilly and O'Reilly to Afanasyev, and boom, goal, 1-0. It was just such a good heads up play.
Yep. That is another one of their rookies in Joachim Kamel, who has had kind of a quiet series, but again is still making things happen. Of their scorers, I believe 1, 2, 3 of their top 4 scorers are rookies. Afanasyev is the odd one out there, but Lheureux, Jussi Parssinen, and Joachim Kamel are all tops in scoring for Milwaukee, which is very fun.
I love it. It's especially whenever these kids can just get on a little tear like that. Perfect.
Yeah, you love to see it. Speaking of the kids, Deana.
Speaking of the kids, I've got a kid. Yes. So I'm going to go with a homer pick as well. If you're looking at the screen, you will see the kid, Luca Del Bel Baluz for the Cleveland Monsters. Now, it's been a bit of a rough postseason for him and his line. But here in the closing minutes, you can see with 2:18 left on the clock, Cleveland was tied with the Syracuse Crunch 4-4 in game 3 out of a best of 5. Cleveland was looking for the sweep, and it was Luca Del Bel Baluz with a wonderful initial shot by Trey Fix-Wolanski to get this all set up, gets the rebound off of Tompkins, and that was it. The Monsters went on for a 6-4 shot. But the main bit of the star for me goes to him because of his tenacity. He has still been important on the ice. He's still, like, his line still gets the starter role every night. But he's just grinding along, and it's starting to really come together for him. So I'm really excited to see now that the proverbial monkey is off his back, what he's going to do here in the next series.
Hopefully lots of good things.
Yes.
As much as that will upset Corey.
Which
we're going to talk about in just a second here is going to be like the bulk of our episode is us just kind of debating, talking about the keys to the series, players to watch, some predictions. Deana and Corey might get in an actual fight. We'll see. Before we move on to that, though, I want to share a little bit more about one of our sponsors, and that's Document Doctors. Is your business growing beyond the 4 walls of your office? As businesses grow, so do the challenges of keeping people trained, safe, and supportive. Document Doctors, a proud sponsor of the Calder's Calling podcast and the Calder Times, offers affordable solutions to help optimize your business and keep the good times rolling. They offer content-focused solutions such as training document creation, back office process optimization, policy and procedure development, and much, much more. Support the podcast and the Calder Times by visiting them at documentdoctorsllc.com. And don't forget to mention us when talking to their team of contentologists. Once again, that is documentdoctorsllc.com. Shop and support small businesses today. We're down to the final 4 teams out in the West. Milwaukee Admirals are going to be taking on the Coachella Valley Firebirds in a rematch of last year. Over in the East, though, which is what we're all excited about, let's be honest, Hershey Bears versus the Cleveland Monsters. It is not necessarily a David versus Goliath matchup, I don't think. Possibly a Goliath versus slightly smaller Goliath matchup. But I think it's fair to say that this is going to be the first real test that the Cleveland Monsters have had. And like let's start off with Cleveland, actually, and then we'll move on to Hershey afterwards. I want to talk a little bit about the series against Syracuse. I want to start off, though, by talking about Cleveland, and we'll talk about Hershey in a little bit. But I want to start off with Cleveland because I want to talk about their series against Syracuse, first of all. which they finished off with very little trouble, I feel like. So Deana, I wanted to ask you, how do you feel about the end of the Syracuse series and how that sets them up for going into the Hershey series?
That's a very good question. This was definitely a series where Syracuse truly threw everything they had at Cleveland, and Cleveland had to adjust their game from, they went from this low shooting, basically stalemate in game one, where the only dividing or basically the deciding factor was a Justin Pearson shorthanded goal. But then it went into a very heavily defensive game for Cleveland in game two. And then with game three, they had, both teams, Cleveland and Syracuse, had to swap out goalies. No word on Jet Greaves, who did come out, was not even dressed. So we don't know if this was truly a case of, listen, we want you to be 100% for Hershey. We know we're going to win this series. Take the night off. Or did he tweak something? Maybe was he a little bit under the weather? But I
will say, sorry to interrupt, but as of the day of recording this, so we're recording this Monday afternoon, Monday morning, the Monsters held practice and Jet Greaves was on the ice in full gear for the practice.
Perfect.
So that does bode well.
Wonderful. Yeah, so there's a million different reasons why he could have been held out, but Malcolm Subban came in. It was his first game since early April, and here we are in very late May. And, as the game went on, he did better and better, especially with it being basically a month and a half since his last game action. Pavel Chayon was backup, so it definitely was again, it was just a series of transition. Syracuse did everything they could, but even their top scorers, and say like Gage Gonsalves, who I don't believe was in game three, it just wasn't enough. And the Monsters have been evolving ever since they lost that first game against Belleville, and it's been up from there. And Jay actually just pointed out something really interesting in our little stream chat here, that Malcolm Subban actually started for the Rochester Americans in the Eastern Conference Final last year too. So he is no stranger to these high pressure situations, and who better to back up someone in Jet Greaves that has not seen pro playoff action than an experienced netminder like that.
For sure. I do want to give Corey the credit for Subban starting for Rochester in the ECF last year. I did not have that fact.
That was Corey. I thought it was Jay. I'm so sorry.
I was gonna steal the credit and then decided no, I'm not going to do that. But I did point out we recorded an episode of Locked On Blue Jackets yesterday where we talked about the Monsters facing the Hershey Bears, etc. And the only goalie that has a win on the Cleveland roster against the Hershey Bears so far this season is in fact Malcolm Subban. So who knows? We'll find out when game one starts. We'll talk a little bit more about Cleveland later on, I think. But Corey, I want to talk to you about the Hartford series, because I feel like going into it, we all kind of, I think, expected a little bit that Hershey was going to do a murder. But I don't think the series was as much of a murder as it looked on the score sheet. Does that sound correct?
Yes and no. I would say that Hartford did give it a good push. They scored the first goal in game three. They came out pretty solidly in front of their home fans. But I feel that the Bears were as advertised in that series, perhaps a little bit more than coming out of the gate against Lehigh Valley in the first round. And, there's comments made that, that Lehigh Valley gave them a harder push than Hartford did. And, whether it's Hartford maxed out, beating two really good teams in Providence, and I believe Charlotte was their first round win. I don't know if they ran out of gas. I mean, certainly they didn't come into it on the right foot with not having Dylan Garand in net for the first game. That kind of set the tone in some ways there too. I think it was better for them in game two, but again, Hershey's offense, whether they were opportunistic or found ways to capitalize in certain situations and things like that, I think the Bears largely played a very complete 3 games, and their offense was really good. They found at least 4 goals in each of their each of the 3 games there. I mean, that's more akin to the Hershey Bears team that we saw throughout the regular season, I think, as well. So if maybe they have Dylan Garand in for that first game, I mean, I'm not even going to knock Olaf Lindbaum because I thought he played admirably in that game in the first one there. And, even having to share the crease after, being pulled out due to an injury concern. I think that it was better for them, but I do think that Hershey was as advertised, which was something they were not in the first series.
Yeah, that makes sense. I do want to point out something with Dylan Garand. He played 9 games for the Hartford Wolfpack in the postseason. He faced more than 50 more shots than second place. So he, over 9 games, faced 306 shots. Second place is Sebastian Kosa of Grand Rapids, who faced 251 shots over his playoff run.
And there's an argument to be made there, too, certainly, that the Wolfpack were not the same without Garand in goal. And, even his return later on in the series, did that have an impact on him? Did the Wolfpack maybe stumble a little bit along the way there? Who knows? But when you're allowing that many shots, there's certainly an argument to be made of not only having great goaltending, but also having great defense, and saying that, hey, if you're going to allow 50 more shots than the next best team there, obviously it's a little bit, uneven of numbers here so far as a team that played a first round series that went 3 games. But at some point that catches up to you. And, I think against a good team like Hershey that can vary chances, that was bound to happen at some point if they were continuing to play and allow that much. So I think it's maybe a reap what you sow type of thing, perhaps, with them against a team that could really vary. Not to say anything bad against Charlotte or Providence. They were 2 highly ranked, that was number 2 and number 3 in the Atlantic divisions. They were no slouches by any stretch, but I think it's further evidence to, perhaps saying that Hershey is more for real than those teams were, perhaps.
Yeah, and I do think there's something to be said for teams running out of gas, especially a team like Hartford, who I believe was missing a handful of key veterans because the Rangers are still in the playoffs up in the NHL. Obviously, they missed Dylan Garand for that opening game against Hershey, but for the most part, I feel like it really was just kind of the kids for Hartford that did the best they could. But like you said, they made it past a very tough-looking Charlotte team. They made it past, I think, shocking everyone, an extremely good Providence team. And their reward for doing that well is to face the Hershey Bears. It's tough. But I do think that this is going to be a really interesting series because I think that this is going to be, and this is no disrespect to any of the teams that either of these teams have faced previously. This is going to be the big test for both of these teams. Obviously, Hershey is the team to beat. Cleveland went 0-4 against them in the regular season. Hershey is flying right now, but Cleveland's on a roll. Cleveland hasn't lost a game since the opening game versus the Belleville Senators. They've got, if Jet Greaves is healthy, they've got the best, statistically speaking, they've got the best goalie in the playoffs right now. And some of their stars haven't even really had a chance to get going yet, So this is going to be a real test for Hershey as well, I think. So Deana, let's talk about some of the stars on Cleveland for a little bit. Like who is your player for Hershey? Like Hershey fans that are listening to this, which player should they be paying attention to on Cleveland? Which player should they be worried about?
Can I just make one quick comment on that regular series record, though?
Please.
Okay, 2 of those 4 wins came in back-to-back games at the end of March. That was when Cleveland went on that massive losing streak because 7 of their top 8
stole all of their players.
Yes, it's that meme that I posted. Like all of my friends or all of my monsters are dead or called up to Columbus. They didn't have Jet Greaves. They didn't have, they were basically relying on like Pavel Chayon at that point. So, just a clarification. They were big goal games. However, it's a different dynamic between these teams. But Hershey fans, who do you need to watch? First of all, everyone needs to watch Brendan Gaunce. So as of the time of recording, this is mid-Monday afternoon on Memorial Day, May 27th for those not in the U.S., and Brendan Gaunce, who has been out for a while, up with the Columbus Blue Jackets. He finished the season injured, was put on waivers yesterday, and then he cleared those earlier today. So that means he is good to go. He has been with the team. He has been traveling with the team. And he is the team captain. He was one of the top points getters behind Trey Fix-Wolanski, who blew everybody out of the water. And yeah, so it'll be really fascinating to see how quickly he gets into playing mode and for a full game, how much he can contribute, because he's one of those players that whenever the rest of his team is starting to slouch a little bit or running into some issues, he's captain for a reason. He picks his team up, will easily bang in 1-2 quick goals, get the momentum going back his team's way, and are able to close out games. So he's definitely one to watch. Of course, Jack Reeves, we've talked about him all season long. Super important for this team right now. He's super dialed in. But in terms of long horses, I guess Josh Dunn, he is a very important part for this team. One of the big bodies on this team, normally in a very check first, let's clear the ice type of role, but he's actually come into his own this season. In limited playing time, he is on a career pace. He's scoring. He's really factoring in on the score sheet, and he's definitely one of those game breaker type players, but no shortage of players to watch. I could go on and name a whole bunch of great intangibles and stuff from Alex Whalen on down to Cole Clayton over to Justin Pearson and Mikhail Putia. But I say those would be the big, 3 or 4.
Corey, what about you? There's so many players in Hershey that I feel like you could point to as, well, you got to watch out for this guy, otherwise you're going to be in trouble. But who are a couple of the big guys on Hershey that Cleveland Monsters fans should be sometimes when I watch a player with the puck, I will just completely on autopilot just go, uh-oh, out loud. What kind of players on Hershey will kind of create an uh-oh reaction if they have the puck? Nate McKinnon is a really great example of this, by the way. Whenever I watch Nathan McKinnon play, I'm like, oh no, every time he has the puck. So who's the Nathan McKinnon of Hershey Bears? No. Who are your players to watch?
If I had to pick on one guy, so I ran this through the stat machine, so to speak, of top scorers from the regular season series between these two teams. And if there's one player that's no surprise to Cleveland Monsters fans, it's probably Ethan Frank. Ethan Frank, what's there to say about him? He's fantastic. He was essentially robbed of having a back-to-back 30-goal season. He actually did have 30 goals, but his last goal happened to hit Alex Limoges on its way in, and therefore it was not a 30-goal season for Ethan Frank. But it's one of my fun little factoids I like to point out about him. But Frank has been absolutely otherworldly against the Monsters. Deana, said to throw out the regular season series between the two teams. I'm all for dissecting it. Ethan Frank had 11 points in 4 games against the Monsters this season. That includes 4 goals and 7 assists over those 4 games. So, Cleveland Monsters fans are most likely already familiar with his body of work just as a result of that. But there's quite a few guys to pick on from the Bears who had great regular season series. Joe Snively is a guy that you might not see score goals as much as he once did, but he is an assist machine. In the regular season series, he's had a great example of that. He has 1 goal and 6 assists. Pierre Dubé is the other Bears forward to have 4 goals against the Monsters in the regular series. Alex Limoges. The list just goes down. I mean, you can kind of keep factoring in certain guys. Mike Vecchione's been really good. Matt Strome is a depth guy that's been really good. So, it's been I would say a 4-line machine for the Bears here so far, where the Bears have kind of had offense from up and down the lineup contributing. And one of those is kind of my biggest question going into this series is that we've seen Hershey forward Riley Sutter has been, mostly returned to health since over the Bears series with the Hartford Wolfpack after being injured and missing most of the first round. But they're having a hard time finding a single person that you'd want to pull out of the lineup to allow a guy, even of his caliber, to jump back into the lineup for. This is a guy that, is essentially your top penalty killing forward, I should say. But that's just a tribute to some young guys like Bogdan Trineyev, Henrik Rubinski, Strome, and Garrett Rowe have all done a fantastic job. Who do you pick out of those four guys to even want to think about pulling out at this point? All the four of those players, factored in on the score sheet or had some kind of big moment in the last game against Hartford. To me, I'd say I don't know how you could pick a single one of those guys to come out, and those are your only candidates without totally throwing your lines into a blender. So it'll be a very interesting question to see who comes on the ice for the Bears to start Thursday's game, because there's a good question for that too. So long-winded answer for that. Those are my players to watch. You could pick almost anybody, but for me, it's Ethan Frank is kind of your standout guy right now.
Yeah, for sure. That's always the question, isn't it? In playoffs, especially in the AHL, when you're carrying so many players, and if everything's going well, everyone is healthy. Who do you take out to get one of your, if one of your guys comes out of the lineup and someone else goes in and plays well, how do you change that up? And I feel like the Monsters are they had a little bit of that issue with James Malatesta in the Belleville series of he was completely healthy and they just didn't have a space for him. So he sat, and then eventually someone got injured and he stepped back into the lineup and then has stayed there since then. So it's always tough to lose your spot on a roster in the AHL playoffs specifically, I feel like, because there's no guarantee, especially on a team as deep as Hershey, and I guess a team as deep as Cleveland, that you're going to get that spot back, unless you are the absolute best player on the roster by literal miles. And even then, who knows, I want to talk about goaltending because of course I do. We're going to go ahead and assume that Jack Reeves is healthy and he's going to be playing in this. And then on the other side of this, is Hunter Shepard. These are the number one and number two goalies in the AHL right now for playoffs. Jack Reeves is 5-1, has a save percentage of .951, and has made 176 saves on 185 shots. Hunter Shepard is 6-1, has a .936 save percentage, and has made 161 saves on 172 shots. Basically identical stat lines. Shepard has played one extra game and allowed 2 more goals. How do we feel about this goaltending matchup? Is it going to be that is this going to be 7-1-0 games in a row? Do we think? Deana, how do you feel about the goaltending matchup going into it?
It's going to be so fun, isn't it? It's going to be so fun to watch.
I need to buy more heartburn meds, I think, is what I need. I need my Tums for this series.
Remind me to pack them when I go to Hershey for game 2, because watching this in person is probably going to elicit a lot of heartburn and anxiety and blood pressure issues, but it's all good. So, but no, I mean, honestly, this is going to be the series to watch if you're a goaltending fan, because again, the two literal best goaltenders of this postseason. You could argue 2 of the top 3 or 4 goaltenders of the entire season are in this series. I mean, I would not vote against either of these goaltenders. The only not to discount Jack Reeves at all. The only real advantage I could give to Hunter Shepard is that he was in this position last season where he helped take this team all the way to the championship and won the championship. Yeah, they had Zach Fucale in the wings, but it was Hunter Shepard that took them all the way through. Corey, please feel free to correct me, but he was the lead goaltender. Jack Reeves has the youth aspect. He's a very good. His team, his coaches trust him 100%. So it'll be kind of fun to see how he navigates this against a very experienced netminder on the other side of the ice, but also he can lean on the experience of Malcolm Subban. They've got Brad Thiessen, who is part of the 2016 Monsters teams that won the whole thing as his goaltending coach. So he has the voices in the room to lean on, but it's going to be a heck of a goaltending duel.
Yeah, it really is going to be, I think, the difference maker in this series. And we'll talk about predictions as we get kind of a little bit further on in this episode, but it is going to be, Hunter Shepard's experience counts for a lot here. And I think that might end up being the difference maker. We talked about Hartford kind of running out of gas. I don't think Cleveland necessarily is going to run out of gas, but I think we all need to remember Jack Greaves has 6 total postseason AHL games to his name, and they all came this season. He's in his 3rd season overall in the AHL. He's very, very young, and this is not me like discrediting him for if he does run out of steam, but I do think that's going to be the difference maker. Is Hunter Shepard has been in this position before, and he knows what he needs to do to get the job done. Like I said, we'll talk like official predictions later on. Corey, how do you feel about the goaltending going in? You've got to feel pretty good, right?
Well, I have 2 points to make here. The one's a counterpoint to what you said before, is that Hunter Shepard took his Bears team the whole way last year, and that was his first playoff run that he's ever made at this level too. So, I mean, I think it's a fair point to...
What you're saying is it's Jack Greaves' turn to go all the way.
I didn't say that.
That's what I'm hearing. That's
yes,
what I'm hearing
that's exactly what you're saying.
I'm being
but it's Jack Greaves' turn to go to the Calder Cup finals.
Generous by saying that I wouldn't count on it. Experience helps, but it's it's more than that, right? And it kind of leads into my second point, is that you look at these 2 teams. My counterpoint is that I think it's going to be more scoring than just 1-0 games or 2-1 games. Like, it is going to be tight. Don't get me wrong. But these 2 teams have also figured it out offensively here too. I mean, just looking at the standings page and sorting by goals for, it's hardly a coincidence that these teams are where they are here in the Eastern Conference. They lead their divisions in scoring. The Bears and the Monsters both have only played 7 games and lead both their divisions in terms of scoring. I mean, you look at the Hartford Wolfpack that played 3 more games still than anybody else. The Bears have still outscored them. So both of these teams are very offensively potent as well. And I wouldn't be surprised to see a couple of games where maybe there's 3 or 4 goals, 3 or 4 goal games type of thing. Basically that, these 2 teams, it's going to be a total team effort to win. It reminds me a little bit of how I felt about last year's Eastern Conference Finals with Rochester, was that these are just 2 well-built, complete teams. And I wouldn't be surprised if you see the lid pop off a little bit in terms of some scoring happening. As good as both of these goaltenders have been, and they've been great all season, I'm not discounting or discrediting anybody with that, is that these 2 teams are just too good to, not find the back of the net at some points. It's going to happen, I think. And, what I really love about the goaltending battle is that these are 2 teams that, yes, they have built their backbones on their goaltenders, but they've also been extremely responsible defensively. And that's kind of my X factor with the Bears, is that I, feel like, what Hunter Shepard doesn't have in terms of shots faced overall in this is a compliment to his defensive team in front of him. The Bears eat a lot of shots in front of them. When Hartford was pushing it at the end of this game 3 here, and they pushed pretty well given the situation, they were only credited with 3 shots on goal in the 3rd period. And that's a credit. You saw it down to the very last second, when the Bears scored on an empty net. That was not an easy empty netter. Aaron Ness absolutely ate a massive shot to block it, to get it to Rowe, who got into Mike Vecchione, who buried the empty net series, clincher, insurance goal, whatever you want to call it. So I'm predicting that there will be some more offense in this series than what we're giving credit for. Because, yes, those 2 goaltenders, it's nothing taking away from either of them. But I think that the big X factor is that these teams are just so gifted offensively that it's hard to imagine a lack of goal scoring in certain points there.
Yeah, for sure. I will say, just in terms of some numbers for more goalie numbers. I crunched the numbers real quickly there. So far this playoffs, Hunter Shepard has faced an average of just under 25 shots a game. Jack Greaves has faced an average of just over 30 shots a game. So it's gonna be interesting. I think I'm really excited about this series, and not just because I'm like emotionally invested in the Cleveland Monsters, but it feels very much like this is the series, and then the series in the West is happening. You know, and now that I've said that, this is going to be the most boring series in the world, and the Coachella Valley Milwaukee one is going to have like goalie goals and goalie fights, and like the arena's going to burn down halfway through Game 5, and I'm going to knock on wood because I can only use my powers for evil. We're going to do some predictions in a minute, but Deana, I believe you have some hot takes that you would like to discuss for a second.
All right. So basically, first of all, and I just want this to be like an open conversation between the three of us, because this is our series. This is our time to shine. Let's go. First of all, when you were talking about those average goals, I do want to say that a lot of that was probably front loaded in the Belleville series, because with the Cleveland series, especially in Game 2, they held Syracuse off, and Syracuse was really, really trying in that game to no more than 7 shots in any single period. They had 5 in the first, 6 in the second, 7 in the third, and that was the game where Cleveland won 4-1. So
I do in fact have some numbers for
yes.
So in the Belleville series, Jack Greaves played 4 games, faced 24, 36, 39, and 32 shots in games 1, 2, 3, and 4.
That 39 and 32 does it.
And 36. The 2 games he played for Syracuse was the 28 save shutout in game 1, and then he made 17 of 18 saves in game 2.
And I wouldn't really put that one goal on him. If you go back and watch it, it was just a heck of a shot by Devontae Stevens on the power play.
Right. And even the game that I don't have the numbers for Malcolm Subban up in front of me right now, but I believe he only faced about 29 shots. So
correct.
Not a ton of shots getting through to the goalies. A little more than I would like. I generally like my goalies to face between 20 and 25 shots. But we'll see how that goes going ahead, because Hershey is a completely different, well, it's a completely different bear, if you'll excuse the pun. Here all week, folks.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about goalies. I think you will be Hunter Shepard till you die. I'm 100% Jack Greaves until I die. Like, I will never not think that. Let's talk about defense for just a little bit. Defensemen for the Hershey Bears. I just want to try to learn a little bit, because when it comes to Cleveland, they've got a real nice mix of defensemen that can score. We've seen Marcus Bjork, he's a point per game player. David Juracek's a point per game player. Jakub Zaboral, who has been strictly like a shutdown defenseman, stay at home type of player, guarding the goalie, has a goal and 2 points in 7 games somehow. I don't know how that happened, but it's a nice mix that whenever these guys, especially like Cole Clayton, a big one, whenever they need to lock it all down, they lock it down when they need to. And they got a lot of good defensive-minded forwards that can help them out. But what's the makeup of Hershey's defense? Are they scorers? Is it something where they protect Hunter Shepard more? Because I love this defensive core for Cleveland. They're just fantastic, even without Jake Christensen being available right now.
It is a good debate to be had there, because I think that from what it sounds and what I've seen in terms of statistics is that Cleveland's defensemen are much more involved in the offense than I think Hershey's are in that respect. And some of that's by design. You know, the Bears lose a little bit of that defensive scoring on their power plays. They've had most situations where between their 2 power play units, there's 1 defenseman between them. And that's typically been either Logan Day or Chase Prisky. Now, that's not to say that defensemen aren't capable of scoring, because we've seen some great defensive performances. We saw one earlier in the 3 stars with Hardy Hamanaktel kind of making that goal for Garrett Rowe happen in terms of a high to low shot that's deflected in with just a little bit of space given there. So Hershey's defense, I think they have the capability to produce offensively, but they don't have like those one or two guys that are, this is your big time, your Shane Gostisbehere is one guy that comes to mind where it's just, he's the guy. Like, it's your quarterback. Like, you used to think of Aaron Ness as kind of that guy. He of the, 55 assists or 55 points, I should say, he had from the blue line and, a few years ago, but he's kind of tailored his game more to the defensive side of things a little bit more. I think these guys are just a complete package in terms of, being able to protect their goalie. They eat tons of shots during the games. They eliminate so many shots. They're so smart and, they just got Vincent Iorio back from being injured all playoff long from the Washington Capitals. That kind of gives them, I think, their most fearsome top six they've had all playoff run. And that's no disrespect. They have some great depth with, Logan Day, who got injured. Jake Massey's really good. And Dmitry Osipov has been really good, although he's kind of, your third man buried kind of thing right now where he's mostly just practicing. All those guys have been really good. I go to bat for any of those guys any day of the week, just from the sacrifices and the great plays I've seen them make. So I think there's a lot of similarities there, but I do think Hershey's defense is a little bit more defensive oriented rather than being offensive dynamos.
So to kind of go back your point with the power play goals, only two. So let's see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we have 5 goals for defensemen so far in the Calder Cup playoffs for Cleveland. Only 2 of those are power play goals.
Okay, so it's not quite as far off as I think I would have thought.
No, for them, a lot of how this team kind of comes together offensively is a lot of blue line setup plays. So like especially the Marcus Bjork and David Juracek, those two especially, just patrol that blue line so well and get their team set up with kind of these long bomb or nice stretch passes. And there you go. Next thing you know, puck's in the net. These guys got first assist, second assist. But especially how Cleveland is playing right now in the playoffs with this scoring by committee mindset, I would almost want my defenseman involved at this point because it makes me feel better that sounds like Cleveland just has to get through the defense and then they should be fine. Hopefully. No, I'm loving this idea about the defense coming in, and they've got 10, 13, 15, 16, 17 points so far through 7 games. And I love an active defense.
And, the one counterpoint I should make here, 2 points I guess I want to make here is that, I'm just pulling up the stats for Hershey's defenseman. Chase Prisky's been really, really underratedly good. He was good in the regular season, but I'm just learning for the first time now that he's a point per game player with 1 goal and 6 assists, which is incredibly impressive for me, which I love to see. But the one stat that I do put some weight in when it comes to, saying how balanced your defense is plus minus. And that's only if you have a decent, pool of stats. Like, you have more games played to really validate the stat in some ways. Like I'm looking at Hershey stats. Vincent Iorio was a -1. He's got 1 game played. Like that's not fair to him to say at this point. But, guys like Prisky and, I value it with defensemen a little bit more just because it kind of tells you a tale of how effective a defenseman is with when they're on the ice type of thing. If, you're a heavy minus, you can kind of say, ooh, this guy's, a lot of things appear to be just as from a statistical perspective going wrong on this guy's watch. And from a Hershey perspective, you can't really say that too much about 2 tons of these guys. If you sort it by plus minus, obviously Prisky has the plus minus to go with the scoring that he has there. But I look at a guy like Lucas Johansson, he's got 4 assists and his +6. For a team that's doing a pretty good job scoring goals, you can kind of see that a lot of that kind of correlates there. Now, I know a lot of people will throw plus minus out the window. I understand that. But for me, it's a nice defensive stat to kind of have under your belt that kind of correlates well in my mind with success.
Okay. If we're going to do counterpoints, Cleveland's only minus here is a -1 for Nick Blankenberg, who's only played 1 game. Everybody else is at least a +2, going up to +5 with all their defensemen. And it screams that Coach Trent Vogelhuber is we're seeing it on the forward lines. He's just rolling all 4 lines all game long. There's no line that he really sticks to. But with these defensemen being a 5-4, these are all pluses: 5-4, 3-3, 2-2-2. They're being rolled just as equally, just as effectively as the forward lines, and they're all obviously doing really good. It almost worries me that Chase Prisky, wonderful defenseman, 14 shots. That's just ridiculous. 7 points, but are they overusing him? Might he tire out? Like, what kind of situations is he in?
The one thing to note with all of Hershey's, I would almost say this goes across the board for the Bears, that they're very even balanced when it comes to usage, I think, where there are some players that, in my mind, some players might get more use than others in certain situations, sure. But a lot of these guys, I feel like that there's confidence in throwing any defensive pairing out. And, Prisky is a little bit more offensively tailored. He's definitely gifted that way as well, certainly. But my thing that I love about it is that, they'll more utilize a pairing like what's been Dylan McElrath and Aaron Ness kind of as your shutdown pair defensively, probably at first glance over those kinds of guys. So, I do think it's balanced. That's not to say Prisky wouldn't take a defensive shift there if needed. Like I said, you could throw any of those 3 pairings out there in a defensive zone situation and not worry about any of them. If I can even be so bold as to, say I think that they're at a peak now, because I think that, adding Vincent Iorio into this lineup, again, no disrespect to either of the other 3 guys that are sitting out as a result, Vincent Iorio is Vincent Iorio. He's, a top draft pick of the Washington Capitals for a good reason. And I adore the 6 players that they're going to dress for that for many reasons. And, it's except for maybe I can think of off the top of my head, it's last year's group, basically just again. I think the only difference is that Gabriel Carlson is not here anymore. I'm probably forgetting somebody else who I shouldn't be forgetting, but, the only new additions have been Hardy Hamanaktel and Chase Prisky. So, again, the full confidence of me in this group is just fully on display here.
So before we get into our predictions and stuff, and obviously we'll turn this back over to Jay, who was just sitting there so quietly and listening to all this. I'm going to give Cleveland a brownie point for just being some of the best people and with their fans, because, so in game 3 of the not conference finals, the one before the division finals, a whole bunch of Cleveland Monsters fans took the road trip up to Syracuse. Now, there's one very active fan in a lot of the fan groups. Her name is Tara Gold, and she shared this on Facebook that she was with someone named Rachel who has branded their Jeep into the #RoadMonsters Jeep. Now, the Monsters do this countdown to the Calder Cup where they have a board at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse that has all of this, like the literal numbers of how many games that are left to win for them to get the Calder Cup. And at the end of a win, they'll give a can of spray paint to a player. They go over, cross it off. Well, they have that replicated on a window of the Jeep, and they were able to meet up with Luca Del Belbaluz, my star of the week, and Tyler Angle, and they took some of that car paint or window paint and got it over, and she shared these pictures on Twitter. So I'm going to give the Monsters you're wonderful beings of humans, and I love you, and you get extra brownie points because you're awesome people with your fans. So, I'm going to give them that. And to me, that is a game breaker because you're wonderful people and you deserve good things. And Corey is speechless. I win.
Very fun.
Well, I was supposed to say, I'll counterpoint you. When I stopped at Bears practice yesterday, and they were putting the rink back together from a concert that was at Giant Center over in the interceding times between the the last time the Bears were here, obviously the week difference, and so there was no glass behind the bench for no reason. I don't really know why, but there was a small crowd of fans that kind of filled up that front row there. And Todd Nelson, the players were just talking to the fans that were sitting there. And Todd Nelson walks by and he says, "Hey, you guys better be careful. You might get hit by a puck there." And he laughed and he goes, he was happy to have people there, and they stood around and talked to fans for a little while. So the Bears are always great with their fans, especially the ones that come out to practice all the time for those ones. So the good human points, the Bears always make time for people. Whether that's me or whether that's anybody else, they're extremely kind, and nothing but good things to say about them as people. I think it's kind of an unwritten rule. I was talking to somebody about this at the end of practice, where it's almost an unwritten rule that the Bears have good people as well as good players. Like, it's almost like half the qualifications of the hockey players they pick to have in their organization, in my opinion. So that's just one of the things that, again, makes the Bears a very special organization.
Final question. Is there any point that I could make about Cleveland that you would not have a counterpoint for?
I mean, I could probably do something. It might just be like, well, we had 111 points in Hershey this past season type of thing. But, that might be my only one at this point. But, the Bears were, I don't want to take any credit away from the Bears. I mean, they were beleaguered by player losses. I mean, we are talking about this series without mentioning the Bears don't have Mike Scarbosa for this playoff series, which, might cripple some other teams there, which, I think is an impressive notch in the teams. Well, obviously, they did it last year, too, by and large, without Scarbosa. But this was a guy that was on a heater. I mean, he would have been, probably had, in my opinion, a new career single-season best in terms of points, at least, if we're talking about him playing a full season in Hershey. So, again, I know we were kind of saying that, I've said it before, that the regular season series almost doesn't count, but, is not that it doesn't count because it happened, but, it's not an accurate reflection of what we're going to see in this series coming up, of course. So, I think it's going to be fascinating to see these two teams at full power, maybe more akin to that first game of the season, the second game of the season, I should say, really, that we saw way back in October, where Brendan Gaunce was on the roster back then. Obviously you're still figuring out the early season is the counterpoint to that counterpoint. But I think it's just going to be a lot of fun to watch. I'm really excited for it.
It's going to be fun. It's going to be terrible, but it's going to be fun.
How is it going to be terrible? How is it going to be terrible?
Terrible for my blood pressure. Terrible for my blood pressure.
Okay, fair, but
it's already
worth it?
Yeah, apparently I'm already having a stroke. Words are difficult. Leave me alone.
I'm glad this is happening just because it gives me a chance to go visit Hershey for the first time since I was like single-digit years old, and I've been in double-digit for quite a while now. I've been in double-digit way too long, and there goes my. Okay, it's not good for my green screen either.
Well, there's the cold open.
My green screen fainted. It said, "No, it's too much. It's too much.
It's too much for you. It's too much for your green screen. It's too much for Jay."
Yeah,
Calder Times is melting around us.
Don't worry about it. Everything is fine.
I didn't say it's too much for me. I'm excited. I'm not excited about what did I say? It's going to take 6 hours to get over to Hershey, but I get to hang out with Corey, so that's cool.
Yeah, it could be worse.
Yeah.
Shall we talk about some predictions for this series?
Yeah.
So it's a 7-game series now that we've reached the East and the West finals. How many games is this series going to? Who wins? And who scores the series winning goal? Deana, let's start with you.
Okay, well, I already have my numbers in mind because shout out to the Locked On Blue Jackets podcast that Jay runs. Always my first listen of the day. Haha, plug that. Okay, so I'm going to hold on to the same numbers. If the game ends in 6, Hershey takes it. If Cleveland can force a game 7, they will come out of the East. Who will score? I'm on my Brendan Gaunch train. I don't remember if you asked me this when we recorded yesterday, Jay, so I'm sorry if this changes. But now that I know Brendan Gaunch is back, I'm going to say either him, and just for the fact that I'm so high on him right now, either him or Alex Whalen, who's a guy we don't talk nearly enough about.
It's going to be either going to be exactly who you think it is, or it's going to be the randomest dude on the roster.
Oh, so you mean it'll be okay, if we're going for the most random person on the roster, that will be, there's really no one I would call random. Like Alex Whalen would be the random.
Yeah,
choice.
exactly. That's what I'm saying. Alex Whalen is that guy. You know, he's some dude. Christian Pearson is arguably some dude as well, but he's also leading the team in scoring. So, Corey, how do you feel about this series? How long is it going? Who's winning? Who's scoring the series winning goal?
I think it's going to be Hershey in 6. I have seen this. This feels, again, maybe it's just me thinking back on last year and maybe drawing some similarities to it. But I think it's going to be 6, and I think it's going to be some close. It's going to be a close 6. In that, it's going to feel like 7 games without being 7 games, where, it'll probably take a Herculean effort at some points, kind of like it did with Rochester last season, where, the Bears, like, for instance, in game 6, won 1-0. And, to pull a, reference there, like a random guy is going to score the goal. Like in last year with Shane Gersich, who is unfortunately no longer with the team this year. So, I do think it'll be one of those fourth line guys like, I could picture Matt Strome or Bogdan Trineyev scoring that clutch goal. We're going to be like, this guy hasn't, put the puck in as much. Like, it's going to be a role player, basically, is going to, be the ones that step out. Last year, a lot of the scoring was Mason Morelli. And, again, miss him to death. One of the guys that was incredibly hard to replace for this year's team. But I just like what I've seen from the Bears so much so far. It felt like, they really picked up in that second round series where they left off in the regular season a little bit more than Lehigh Valley. It felt like the Lehigh Valley series really poked the bear, to steal the quote from last year. It poked the bear back into form. We saw Providence kind of get bounced early because they weren't ready for it. Again, they weren't ready for the playoffs this season. The Bears, had so much time off that it was concerning for a little while, but it's been more Bears type efforts recently. And I can't bet against it when it's like that.
And Jay, what about you?
Oh, I'm sorry. In terms of series winners too, I guess I kind of did say it, but I'd love to see a guy like Bogdan Trineyev score the winning goal. But my heart also says Ivan Miroshnichenko could be that guy too.
Again, it's going to be exactly who you'd expect it to be, or random dude number 4, and nothing in between.
Number 4.
I'm going full hot take here. I'm going Cleveland in 6, and I'm going to go with my guy for the game winner, the series winner. I'm going to go with Owen Sillinger.
Oh, I love that. Yes.
Make it happen. I'm going bold here. Because why not?
I love that. Like, that somehow seems so right. I don't know why.
That's what my heart says. My head says something else, but my head is dumb and we don't listen to it. So I think, unless we have anything else pressing, that's going to do it for us here at Calder's Calling. If you want to check out our written coverage of the AHL, we will have previews for both this series and the Coachella Valley Milwaukee Admirals series up at thecaldertimes.com by about Wednesday or Thursday, I believe. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all at The Calder Times, all one word. If you haven't already, hit subscribe on YouTube or your favorite podcatcher. Leave a like, leave a comment. Don't forget to tell your friends where they can find all the AHL hockey chatter their hearts desire. We'd like to extend a final thank you to Document Doctors. Until next week, I've been Jay Foster. That's been Deana Weinheimer. That's been Corey Swartz. And we have been Calder's Calling.
it would be one of the most villainous origin stories ever to have occurred. If a GM were to go in and say, oh, our series against you is starting in a few days. Your captain is up on waivers. Yoink. We can't use him. However, you don't get him either.
Oh man, they should have done that. That would have been funny.
Not to the Cleveland people.
Would have been hilarious then.
For you.
That would have. I was going to say that'd be the silliest thing, but it'd be nuts. It'd be kind of, I don't know. Like I said, like I don't think that would happen just because of like how weird it is, but it's kind of nuts.